there lived a husband and wife. For a long time they already wanted to have a child, but he was not there.
Oh.
One day, my wife fell ill. The husband asked her what she wants the most. The wife replied that there was a magnificent garden nearby, where many of the most beautiful flowers grow. There is a beautiful Rapunzel in the garden. It looked so fresh and so green that she really wanted to taste it. But the garden was surrounded by a high fence, and no one dared to enter it, since this garden belonged to one witch. She possessed great power, and everyone in the world feared her. The husband loved his wife very much, and decided to get a Rapunzel for her, no matter what it cost him. And so at dusk he climbed over the stone fence into the sorceress's garden, in a hurry picked up a whole handful of green Rapunzel, and brought it to his wife. She immediately made herself a salad from it, and ate greedily. She liked this salad so much that the next day she wanted even more than before. The husband made his way into the garden again, but the witch was already standing in front of him. She glared at him angrily and said that he would pay a lot for stealing the Rapunzel. He asked the witch not to be angry, because he tore off the Rapunzel for his wife, who was very ill. And he loves her so much.
Okay.
The witch's anger passed a little, and she said that if it was true, she would allow him to collect as much Rapunzel as he wanted, but on one condition. He will have to give the witch the child who will be born to his wife. The husband agreed with fear. When the wife gave birth to a daughter, the witch immediately appeared, took the child with her, and named her Rapunzel. Rapunzel became the most beautiful girl in the world. When she was 12 years old, the witch locked her in a tower. That tower was in the forest, and it had no doors or stairs. Only at the very top was a small window. When the witch wanted to climb the tower, she called Rapunzel to pull her sides down. And Rapunzel had long, beautiful hair. She hears the voice of the witch, loosens her braids, ties them up to the window hook, and the hair falls down, and the witch then climbs up, clinging to them.
Hello.
Several years passed, and the king's son happened to ride a horse through the forest where the tower stood. Suddenly he heard singing, and it was so pleasant that he stopped and began to listen. Rapunzel sang it in her wonderful voice. The prince wanted to climb up. He began to look for the entrance to the tower, but it was impossible to find him. He once saw how the witch climbs up the braids that Rapunzel lowered her. And the next day, when it was already getting dark, the prince drove up to the tower and called Rapunzel. She heard, pulled her braids down, and the prince climbed up. Rapunzel, seeing that a man she had never seen came to her, was very frightened at first. But the prince spoke to her affectionately and said that his heart was so touched by the singing that he decided to see her without fail. Then Rapunzel ceased to be afraid, and when he asked if she agreed to marry him, she gave her consent and held out her hand to him. But they just did not know how to go down together. They figured out that when the prince came, he would always take a piece of silk with him, and Rapunzel would weave a ladder out of it. And when the ladder is ready, they will go down it together and leave. The sorceress did not notice anything until one day Rapunzel asked why it is easier to drag the prince up. The sorceress understood everything, got angry and clutched in rage at Rapunzel's beautiful hair. I wrapped them around my left arm several times, and with my right grabbed the scissors and cut them off. She took the sorceress into the dense thicket of Rapunzel and hid her there. She tied the severed braids to the window hook, and when the prince appeared, she pulled them down. The prince climbed up and saw the witch. She looked at him with her malicious look and said that he would never see Rapunzel. The king's son was beside himself with grief and jumped out of the tower in despair, but the thorny thorns of the bushes, on which he fell, gouged out his eyes. The blind prince wandered for several years in grief and sorrow through the forest, all the time grieving and crying for his beloved lost. Once he went into a dense thicket. Suddenly the prince heard someone singing. It seemed so familiar to him, and he went to meet him. When he came closer, Rapunzel recognized him, threw herself on his neck and cried bitterly with joy. 2 tears fell in his eyes, and the prince regained his sight and began to see as before. He brought her to his kingdom, and they lived for many, many years in happiness and joy.
Once upon a time, a king lived in a distant country. And he had 11 sons and 1 daughter, Eliza. The royal children lived well and carefree until their stepmother appeared in their lives. No one knew that the new queen was an evil witch. She hated the king's children, always complained about them, and dreamed of expelling them from the castle. The evil queen slandered poor children so much that soon the king himself began to believe her words. First, he sent his daughter away to be raised in a nearby village. There she was destined to live up to 15 years. The evil queen wanted to send the boys away too, but they were still too young. Therefore, the father left them in the castle. And then one day an evil sorceress made her way into the children's room and put a spell on the sons of the king. She turned them into 11 wild swans and then opened the window. And the boys who became birds flew out of the castle. Years passed, and Eliza turned 15. On this day, she returned to the palace. While waiting for the king's arrival, the girl met her stepmother, who was angry that the princess would now live in the palace. And Eliza, tired from the road, did not notice how she fell asleep. Having chosen the right moment, the queen entered the room and put a spell on the girl. Suddenly, the princess's hair became dirty and unkempt, and her face changed and darkened. At this time, the king returned to the castle. He missed his daughter and dreamed of meeting her. Entering the room, the king saw that the girl on the princess's bed was not at all like his daughter. He got angry and ordered to expel the stranger from the castle. Eliza had to spend the night in the forest. In the morning she washed in the pond, the spell was asleep, and the girl again became a beauty. Immediately she met a kind old woman. She told the princess that every evening she sees 11 swans in golden crowns by the river. Then Eliza went to the water. At sunset, swans flew there, which at that very moment turned into her brothers. They immediately recognized Princess Eliza and hugged her. The brothers told the girl that the evil stepmother had bewitched them. And now every morning they turn into swans, and at night they return to their true appearance. In the morning, the brothers turned into swans again and took Eliza with them, placing the girl in a basket of willow bark. The princess was happy to fly through the sky with her brothers. It seemed to her that it was a beautiful dream, and soon she fell asleep for real. In a dream, the fairy of the castle appeared to her, who told how you can save the brothers. Eliza had to pick some nettles and weave 11 shirts for the brothers, but not say anything, otherwise the brothers would disappear forever. The next morning, the girl began to collect nettles. The grass burned her hands, but Eliza continued to pluck it. Suddenly the girl was noticed by a handsome prince hunting nearby. He was fascinated by the beauty of the princess and went up to her to say hello.
Hello!
But Eliza remembered what the fairy said and therefore did not say a word. The prince was struck by the silence of the forest beauty, so he soon took her as his wife and took her to his castle. While spending days in the palace, the princess continued to secretly weave nettle shirts. But one day the prince's advisor saw Eliza doing this. He spread rumors that the princess was a magician at night and should have been arrested. Over time, the prince also believed that his wife was a witch. Then he ordered his soldiers to imprison the girl in prison. However, even in prison, the young princess continued to weave shirts. Finally, the day came when Eliza finished sewing the last shirt. At that moment, the dungeon door opened and the princess was taken to trial. They decided to sentence the poor girl to death. And at that moment, when the judge read out the verdict, 11 swans descended from heaven. Eliza pulled shirts from under her skirt and threw them over the birds. Her brothers immediately became human. But the princess did not have enough nettles for the sleeves for the last shirt, so the younger brother had swan wings instead of arms. Then the brothers told their story. And the prince, who deeply believed in his wife's innocence, asked Eliza for forgiveness. The princess immediately forgave her husband. Finally, the brothers were free and Eliza was happy. Together they returned to the castle. The father recognized his children and for many years could not forgive himself for allowing his stepmother to deceive him. And the evil sorceress herself turned into a crow and flew away, never to return to the castle.